master, but the title came out after I did this body of work, and I thought about the word echoes a lot because these paintings, the departure subject of these paintings was the medium of printmaking, and more specific, etchings. I collected a lot of etchings by very specific artists, and what I did was that I started reproducing some of these references directly within my process, which maybe in a little bit I can explain in detail a little better. And so out of that departure in that subject, I started constructing my paintings, and eventually, and hopefully ending with my own language and my own abstraction. I tend to take, before even this show and within my process of the skin paintings, is that I tend to take references that are very, very specific and layer them over the plexiglasses that I use in my studio where I paint. And eventually when all these layers of reference are quite accumulated within the surface of the glass, is when I grab the process of scraping the painting off the glass. And because of being oil paintings, they tend to get very distorted because the paint sometimes is very, very wet, sometimes very, very dry. So that combination of the medium is what eventually creates my abstractions on my paintings. You know, painting to me has always been something very, very personal. It's a very visual medium more than verbal, and I want to say that for this show, the first time that I came with the idea of kind of start studying the idea of the etchings was because also I felt that my process has a big influence in printmaking. You know, as I make my paintings first in a surface and then eventually scrape that paint off and become almost like a monotype, but a lot more transformed and distorted than a regular monotype process. I did this one painting in my last show in New York, and I did a simple decision of like, when I was reproducing the drawing / painting that I was creating at the moment, instead of painting the line, I decided to construct the line by erasing it rather than adding paint to it. So I took a cloth and I started just making these lines and getting myself influenced with the etching that I was looking at the moment. And I made that decision because I knew that it would create this interesting perspective or form of view in the painting, because by erasing and then eventually adding more of those layers, when I would scrape that what I call that negative space, or that empty lines, we're going to reveal the layers behind it. So I started exploring it after that painting, and it's what took me to most of these paintings that we are here today. This painting specifically was before that, but the reason why I brought this painting was because I wanted also to create an environment that wasn't just one type of form. I wanted to create a contrast within the paintings. I wanted everybody to feel differently when they're standing in front of the piece. This piece, which I titled Bayamon, which is the town that I grew up, it came out very, very unexpected to me. I tend to be more attracted to the part, like when I make my paintings, I want the images to distort completely or almost completely. I just like having hints of the references that I use at the beginning of the process. But with this painting, it came out just the first layer, as you see, just with some gestures of my blade of scraping the paint. They came across the painting, but you know, the way I responded to it still was like it was a wonderful painting, and I liked it, and I kept it in my studio. Some other times I have paintings that I put to the side because I don't feel that they work as positive as others. So I kept this painting in the studio and for a while, and then when we made the decisions of bringing it for the show, I was a little bit scared, but together with Michelle, actually, we wonderful decision of adding it in the space, and it just works wonderfully. This painting, the background reference to this painting was an etching, a Picasso etching that I saw, and it was a woman and a bed. You know, and I mentioned this reference to you, but I gotta admit that although I take this big recognizable artworks by very, very well-known artists, of course, you know, the departure is not with the idea of giving a homage to Picasso or anything like this. take over these elements that belong in our history and are they work I get very influenced by them, and I use them as tools. And so I departed by painting the glass all white, and eventually I started making the drawing again by erasing over the surface. And then the second layer, I'll speak a little bit more in detail of how I created this painting. But the second layer, for example, was me kind of painting on top of that drawing with these different browns and grays, etc. And after that painting was dry, I covered it with this red. You know, I make all these decisions, but they are, I can really I just have expectations. I never have strictly knowledge of how the painting is gonna come out. So the painting and the process is left to chance, hugely, and it's something that I embrace, that I've been embracing for a long time. That feeling of non-control is very important to me, because I like the excitement, you know, when creating these paintings, and the process gives me challenges, gives me frustrations, gives me all these different emotional effects. But I think they fall into the work, you know, and end up positive rather than negative. You know, things that may seem like damage or accidents, they transform into gestures that add to the composition of the abstract work. After I did this painting, I headed in the studio for a while, and I came across this image of a butterfly drinking crocodile tears. And when I saw the photo, first of all, I didn't know that happened in nature, right? They also drink tears of turtles. And the contrast between the color of the butterfly and the crocodile, the texture of the crocodile, also the relationship of like beauty and ugly, or rough and soft, flying, solid, etc. I felt that it fitted the painting, so I titled it actually like that. I thought it was going to be a little bit too romantic, but formally I thought it fitted very, very well. Although my plan eventually is not to expose them figurative or directly. I don't like people to quickly recognize where I'm taking these references, these inspirations from. So I always searching within like that figurative beginning moment in the process towards this other abstraction, transform this completely, not just into abstract, but into my own language, pretty much. And a lot of them, that's why I like when hints of that figuration bleeds through some of the paintings. But when it's a lot, I can sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable within it. But yeah, you know, I like the fact that these are very specific paintings, and some of them, not my paintings, I mean the references, and some of them have very, very strong and specific contents. And I kind of through the process, you know, distort that and question it within myself and the own, you know, vocabulary of like abstract painting or painting history in general. This painting, I don't know if you see that color-wise things change, and I was talking this yesterday, was that, and earlier also, because they asked me why they feel so different, and you know, as I'm in the studio, there's a lot of emotions involved, and when I'm working with one painting and I feel that there's a certain tone in the painting that's becoming a lot more gray or a little more dark, eventually, you know, I want to disconnect from there, then I start working on something that hopefully will be a lot more bright, or more geometric, or more fluid, or more linear, etc. I like kind of, you know, being around these different type of expressions and gestures that definitely shows different emotions. This painting, I took the first references that I departed with this painting was an etching by Jackson Pollock that I have never seen before, and it was very interesting to see how different it seemed from how we expect or we know about his work. And I studied it, and that's why you see the scratching here that seems scratched in this surface. It's not in this surface, it was in the plexiglass. And it was very interesting to translate with different tools that I made in my studio to scratch all these elements and make this drawing, and eventually I started making these paintings behind or after it was dry, and some again referencing all the very specific artists. In this particular one, I referenced an artist named Stuart Davis, and I just thought that the contrast between the works, I had the expectation that it was gonna come out really interesting, because this was very linear, very drawing, almost kind of like Twombly-ish to it. And then the second one was very geometric, very colorful, very solid colors. So when you kind of collapse all these different gestures in a formal way, you know, I'm not doing it necessarily just historical or because this Jackson Pollock or the other one had a certain meanings to me, but formally, I chose them formally because I had already a knowledge of the process and an expectation, knowing that hopefully it's gonna work at the end, you know, as an abstract painting. Sometimes you have these impulses, you know, and you follow them. You follow them for good or bad. Sometimes they can fail too. And within not just this painting, but other ones, there was, I had a certain feeling that there was a certain flatness to it, and I wanted to create a little even more contrast. And so that's when eventually, one of the nights I was working in the studio, I felt that the painting definitely needed something to kind of push forward and added a little more gestures to it. And that's why I did this marks on it and a few other ones. I've always been very self-critical of myself, and eventually I feel that I position myself in moments that feel systematic, and I tend not to feel comfortable with that. So I try to find ways where I can like distance myself from that feeling. And the faults at some point, which they are and were very important to me in many different ways, with those previous painting. Eventually, I felt that the viewer was staying on the surface of the painting, and they weren't really entering, which was fine. The work was very structural, was very well material, the materiality of the painting. But at some point, I felt that I wanted the viewer to go a little deeper in what was going on in the painting and add some more content to it, other just material and process. So I stepped away from the wrinkling and started collaging them flat. And I felt like I wanted to work with something a little more small version, because some of the paintings I noticed that a painting like the one in the back, the big one, doesn't work the same at a smaller scale than it works at a big scale. So I kind of learned that in the studio. So I started playing with this format over there, which is not quite small, it's neither quite big, but I felt that it was quite intimate still. And I've been using it quite in the studio lately. The title are not necessarily specifically related to what's going on in the paintings. It's more of a kind of like a reaction of something, you know, like the story I was painting with one of the butterfly drinking crocodile tears, and they just come to you. Although also sometimes I collect titles and phrases that I come across in books and songs, and then eventually, you know, they start fitting within each other. And if it's not that, it's at the moment, as I'm working on them, I feel like, hey, this has a feel of fruitful, and I title it like that, just fruitful, you know, nothing too complex neither. So I don't want, you know, I don't want the titles to, influence. Yeah, the painting, correct. I found that the day I collaged this piece, I actually got really excited. This again, the departure in terms of the etching that I chose for this painting was again etching by Jackson Pollock. I was very impressed with several of this etching, because if you would see them, you wouldn't know that it was his work. And then eventually I made this other paintings behind. One thing that I decided when constructing the work was that when I did the first layer of the painting, I let it dry for longer than usually I do. And I did that because I know that the more dry the painting was, the less the first layer was going to come out, the more the second and third and fourth layers were going to hopefully reveal to the emptiness of the first layer. And so this was a painting that I had an idea like, hey, I want to balance this kind of very white environment and then with the colorful, but I wanted it pretty balanced. And I was happy because I felt that as I made the decisions of the painting, it ended up happening like I was imagining it, or at least close as possible. I still feel it has a certain landscape feeling to it, and I titled it Wind Ballad because I felt that these felt like some sort of drawing of winds or something like that. All I did was kind of start with this dark color and erase, and then I started painting on the back this quite orange and red. You can see through this kind of which paintings are in front of each. You can see that this dark first was the first one, and then when that dried, and after I erased the lines, I painted the whole thing orange, and after the orange dried, I painted the whole thing red, and after the whole thing dried, I painted it black again. So that's why all these reflect there, and also this white. But then after making this one, I kind of wanted to make it, like I said, more complex. So I started going to just adding more fully and colorful paintings rather than just one pure color. So I took the desk and I covered it with this material that I found, and the chair, instead of the skin of painting, instead of collaging them on canvas, I started covering the chair with the oil paint skins. I don't know, just exploring, and it ended up being a really interesting piece. I showed that painting on a group show at Lehmann Maupin before I was actually in the program with them. They did a group show summer. It was very heavy, very complicated, but I think I'm constantly moving myself within what I do in the studio. It's not like I'm always just painting. There's a lot of exploration involved in there. So I'm, making ceramic or